The Galactic Military Academy had processed over 3 million cadets during its 800-year history. Across countless star systems, it was considered the final proving ground for species selected to lead the defense forces of civilized space. Every recruit who entered its gates already belonged to the upper fraction of their world's military candidates. Every graduate left carrying authority recognized by hundreds of governments. Yet among all its traditions, none carried greater prestige than admission into Predator class. The designation had little to do with diet. Across the galaxy, Predator had become a military classification describing species capable of sustained aggression, independent decision-making under pressure, and exceptional combat performance. Predator graduates commanded fleets, led invasions, suppressed pirate empires, and defended entire sectors during crises. Prey species occupied valuable roles throughout galactic society, but combat leadership was rarely entrusted to them. Centuries of statistical analysis appeared to justify the distinction. Predators adapted faster during emergencies. Predators performed better in hostile environments. Predators maintained effectiveness even when communications collapsed. At least, that was the accepted belief. The induction ceremony for the newest Predator cohort proceeded exactly as it always had. Rows of cadets filled the massive orientation chamber. Towering reptilian hunters stood beside armored insectoid warriors. Massive apex carnivores from high-gravity worlds exchanged confident glances with razor-clawed pack species famous for their battlefield coordination. Every recruit present had spent years competing for one of the limited seats available. Many already viewed themselves as future legends. At the center platform stood Senior Instructor Kareth. A veteran of 4 major campaigns, Kareth possessed enough combat decorations to silence almost any argument before it began. His species measured status through scars. His body carried dozens. The room quieted as he activated the induction roster. Names appeared above the chamber floor in glowing columns. Kareth began routine verification. Species. Origin world. Threat ranking. Combat specialization. Everything progressed normally. Then he stopped. For nearly 3 seconds, nothing happened. Most cadets failed to notice. Those closest to the platform did. Kareth's eyes narrowed. He checked the entry again. Then a third time. A fourth. The chamber's ambient noise slowly faded as recruits realized something had interrupted the instructor's rhythm. Kareth expanded the file. The species designation displayed clearly. Human. A wave of confusion spread through the room. Several cadets exchanged looks. Some searched their personal databases. Others simply frowned. Human. The name meant little. A few recruits had encountered passing references in obscure historical records, but most had never heard of the species at all. When the chamber doors opened and the final recruit entered, confusion turned into disbelief. She looked completely ordinary. At least by Predator standards. She lacked claws. No visible fangs. No armored plating. No venomous spines. No reinforced skeletal structure. No natural weapons of any kind. She appeared young, calm, and remarkably small compared to many of the towering recruits surrounding her. A quiet laugh emerged from somewhere in the room. Then another. Several cadets assumed the Academy administration had made an embarrassing mistake. Perhaps a transfer error. Perhaps a database malfunction. The human seemed unaware of the attention. She simply located her assigned position and stood there patiently. Kareth ignored the murmurs and continued examining the file. What he saw erased any possibility of a clerical error. Threat classification, restricted. Historical assessment, sealed. Military archive access, level 9 authorization required. His pulse accelerated. That authorization level was reserved for information most officers would never see during their entire careers. The Academy should not even possess a candidate with that level of restriction. He opened another section. Most of it remained blocked. Entire portions were redacted. Others appeared intentionally removed. Only fragments remained visible. Each fragment raised more questions than answers. The laughter in the chamber grew louder. One cadet finally spoke. "Sir, why is a prey species assigned to predator class?" Several recruits nodded in agreement. The question seemed reasonable. Kareth slowly lifted his head. The expression on his face immediately silenced those nearest the platform. Because it wasn't annoyance. It wasn't embarrassment. It wasn't anger. It was concern. The kind seen in experienced soldiers moments before entering a battlefield they know nothing about. His gaze moved across the room. Every conversation stopped. Every recruit straightened. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight none of them expected. "Remain silent." The order struck the chamber like a physical force. No one disobeyed. Kareth looked toward the human girl once more before returning his attention to the assembled cadets. Then he delivered a statement that transformed confusion into unease. "Nobody in this room understands what they've just been assigned to train beside." The statement spread through the academy faster than any official announcement. By the following cycle, nearly every cadet in Predator class had attempted to learn something about humanity. None succeeded. The Academy database contained millions of species profiles, historical records, military evaluations, and biological assessments. Entire civilizations could be researched in seconds. Yet every search involving humans produced the same frustrating result. Access restricted. Authorization insufficient. Record sealed. The more obstacles they encountered, the more curious they became. Rumors filled the gaps left by missing information. Some believed humanity had once been a powerful empire that collapsed. Others claimed humans possessed hidden biological abilities. A few insisted the species no longer existed and that the girl was somehow the last survivor. Each theory became more ridiculous than the last. Meanwhile, the human remained completely unaffected by the attention. She attended lectures. Completed assignments. Arrived early. Left on time. While dozens of cadets obsessed over her presence, she behaved as though nothing unusual was happening. That normality only made her more suspicious. Senior Instructor Kareth found himself equally distracted. The restricted file continued bothering him. During a scheduled administrative interval, he accessed a secure communication channel reserved for Academy Command personnel. His request received immediate priority. That alone was unusual. The moment the connection opened, Kareth transmitted the candidate identification code. "I want clarification." A brief silence followed. Then a senior administrator appeared on the screen. Kareth rarely saw concern from command staff. This official looked uncomfortable. "The assignment is intentional." Kareth stared. "Intentional?" "Yes." "Then explain why a species with sealed military archives is enrolled in a first-year training cohort." Another pause. The administrator carefully chose his words. "Your responsibility is observation. I asked for an explanation. You won't receive one." Karetha's patience evaporated. "I have authority over every recruit under my supervision." "Not this one." The answer landed like a strike. Predator class instructors possessed enormous discretion. For command to limit that authority meant forces far beyond the academy were involved. The administrator transmitted a restricted document. Only a few lines were visible. Most remained blacked out. Kareth reviewed the available information. What little he could see made even less sense. Historical record summary. Humanity survival probability during extinction event, less than 1%. Outcome, survived. Secondary crisis projection. Civilizational recovery impossible. Outcome, recovered. Long-term expansion assessment. Species permanently neutralized. Outcome, expansion continued. Kareth read the entries twice. Every prediction had failed. Every impossible outcome had somehow become reality. The administrator ended the transmission before additional questions could be asked. That evening, Kareth pursued another route. Military archives occasionally granted temporary access to instructors conducting advanced evaluations. He submitted a formal request. To his surprise, approval arrived within minutes. Not full access. Fragments. Tiny pieces of information extracted from a much larger classified history. The first report described a rescue operation. An entire colony world had been abandoned after a catastrophic environmental failure. Evacuation projections estimated 40,000 survivors. Human volunteers ignored the projections. They returned repeatedly into conditions deemed unsurvivable. Final evacuation count exceeded 200,000. The second report detailed a military campaign. Enemy analysts concluded human forces were strategically trapped. Probability of successful withdrawal measured below 3%. The humans not only escaped but extracted Allied forces along the way. The third report was even stranger. A simple notation attached to multiple operations. Impossible. 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 Successful. Kareth leaned back in silence. Across centuries of military records, one pattern repeated itself. Humanity consistently achieved outcomes other species considered unattainable. Not through overwhelming technology. Not through superior weapons. Not through numerical advantage. They simply refused to accept limitations that everyone else treated as fact. Elsewhere in the academy, the humans sat alone in a common study area reviewing tactical coursework. Several Predator cadets watched from a distance. One finally approached. "Are the rumors true?" She looked up from her work. "Which rumors?" "All of them." A faint smile appeared. "Then probably not." The answer only deepened the mystery. After the cadet left, she returned to studying as though the conversation had never occurred. Hours later, Kareth received one final document. No historical details. No explanations. Only 2 lines. Candidate designation, miracle candidate. Observation priority, maximum. Intervention prohibited. For the first time since her arrival, genuine uncertainty settled into his thoughts. He had spent decades evaluating dangerous individuals. He knew how to identify exceptional talent. But nothing in the Academy's history resembled this. And somewhere behind layers of classification, the galaxy clearly knew something about humanity that Predator class had yet to discover. The first practical evaluations began 3 days later. For most recruits, this was the stage that truly mattered. Predator class respected performance far more than reputation. It did not matter how impressive a species appeared on paper. The training systems measured results. Many cadets quietly anticipated the same outcome. The human would fail. Perhaps not immediately, but eventually the physical differences between species would become impossible to overcome. The opening assessment seemed designed to prove exactly that. Cadets were dropped into a rapidly changing obstacle environment that combined terrain navigation, threat detection, resource management, and endurance challenges. Conditions shifted every few minutes. Gravity fluctuated. Pathways collapsed. Objectives changed without warning. The strongest recruits immediately surged ahead. Massive predators forced their way through barriers. Fast species relied on speed. Natural hunters trusted instinct. The human did none of those things. She moved carefully. She observed. She adapted. When a route became blocked, she found another. When conditions changed, she adjusted without hesitation. Instead of fighting the environment, she learned how it behaved. By the end of the assessment, several physically superior cadets had exhausted themselves overcoming obstacles she had simply avoided. Her final placement surprised everyone. Fourth. Not first. Not dominant. Simply effective. The next evaluation focused on tactical decision-making. Cadets entered combat simulations against increasingly difficult opponents. The system analyzed aggression, efficiency, and survival probability. Again, expectations centered on the human's apparent disadvantages. Again, those expectations collapsed. While many predator species followed familiar combat patterns, the human displayed remarkable flexibility. If direct confrontation failed, she changed approaches. If an objective became unattainable, she redefined the objective. Several simulations ended with victories that instructors later admitted they had never witnessed before. One scenario required defending a damaged outpost against overwhelming attackers. Most cadets attempted to hold the perimeter. The human abandoned the perimeter entirely. She redirected power systems, manipulated environmental controls, and convinced the simulation's civilian population to participate in defense efforts. The attackers technically won the battle. But the civilians survived. The simulation graded it as a strategic success. Another exercise required locating hidden resources in hostile terrain. Predator instincts pushed most recruits toward aggressive exploration. The human spent valuable time studying environmental patterns. She discovered naturally occurring indicators others ignored and completed the objective with less than half the effort. Senior Instructor Kareth observed every result in silence. The performance data revealed a pattern. The human was not outperforming others because she possessed superior abilities. Many cadets remained stronger. Several were faster. Others demonstrated greater natural combat instincts. Yet whenever circumstances changed unexpectedly, she gained ground. Every challenge rewarded adaptation. Every complication created opportunities she somehow recognized before anyone else. The most dramatic demonstration occurred during a large-scale team exercise. Multiple squads entered a complex training environment designed to test cooperation under pressure. Halfway through the operation, alarms suddenly activated. At first, everyone assumed it was part of the simulation. Then emergency warnings began appearing across every display. A system's failure had occurred inside the training complex. Several sections lost power. Security doors sealed automatically. Communication networks became unreliable. A number of cadets found themselves trapped behind reinforced bulkheads. Confusion spread instantly. Many recruits waited for instructions. Others attempted to force exits open. Several teams became isolated. The malfunction was not life-threatening, but nobody knew that yet. Panic often appears long before actual danger. The human reacted immediately. While others argued about what was happening, she started gathering information. She identified which communication channels still functioned. She organized location reports. She created a map using fragmented data from multiple squads. Within minutes, she understood more about the situation than anyone else involved. Then she began coordinating rescue efforts. Not because she possessed authority. Because she possessed a plan. Cadets from species that had mocked her days earlier found themselves following her directions without realizing it. Teams were redirected. Resources were shared. Trapped recruits were located. One by one, isolated groups reached safety. By the time Academy technicians restored normal operations, every missing cadet had been accounted for. No injuries. No casualties. No one left behind. Later that evening, Kareth reviewed the incident recordings. Most of what he witnessed impressed him. One detail unsettled him. The organizational method used by the human matched a strategy he had previously encountered only once. Inside a heavily restricted military archive. A human archive. And for the first time, he began wondering whether the classified records had understated humanity rather than exaggerated it. Senior Instructor Kareth spent the next several nights pursuing answers that seemed determined to remain hidden. The human cadet's performance alone would have justified attention. What troubled him was the consistency. Every archived fragment he uncovered pointed toward the same conclusion. Humanity repeatedly survived situations that should have destroyed them. Eventually, a new authorization arrived. Temporary. Limited. Enough to access a deeper layer of historical records. The first file opened with a date nearly 4,000 years old. At that time, humanity had not been a respected power. They had not commanded vast territories or influential alliances. They occupied a relatively small region of known space and remained largely overlooked by major galactic governments. Then disaster struck. A chain of events began with environmental collapse on multiple human worlds. Economic networks fractured. Supply routes failed. Population centers suffered catastrophic losses. Several neighboring powers predicted complete civilizational breakdown within a few generations. Those predictions appeared reasonable. Every model reached the same conclusion. Humanity could not recover. The damage exceeded accepted survival thresholds. The records included hundreds of assessments from respected analysts, economists, military strategists, and political experts. All agreed. Extinction was not certain. But recovery was impossible. Yet the files that followed documented something extraordinary. Instead of collapsing, humans adapted. When resources became scarce, they developed alternatives. When infrastructure failed, local communities replaced systems that no longer existed. When communication networks fragmented, independent regions coordinated through methods considered inefficient by galactic standards. The solutions often appeared crude. Sometimes they seemed irrational. Many violated established theories of optimization. But they worked. Year after year, humanity stabilized. Decade after decade, they expanded. A century later, the same civilizations that had predicted their downfall found themselves trading with a stronger and more resilient human society. Kareth continued reading. Another archive described a military crisis occurring generations later. An enemy coalition launched a campaign designed around overwhelming advantages in numbers, logistics, and firepower. Human defeat appeared mathematically unavoidable. Strategic forecasts estimated survival probabilities below 1%. Military historians studying the conflict later reached a disturbing conclusion. The forecasts had been accurate. Humanity should have lost. The problem was that humans kept changing variables no one anticipated. When supply lines were targeted, they redesigned supply systems. When fleets were trapped, they converted civilian infrastructure into evacuation networks. When allies abandoned them, they reorganized around smaller partnerships and continued fighting. Every setback became the foundation for another solution. Again and again, expected defeat transformed into survival. A phrase appeared repeatedly throughout the records. Humans do not solve probable problems. Humans solve immediate problems. The distinction fascinated Kareth. Most species relied heavily on prediction. Military academies taught students to identify likely outcomes and operate accordingly. Humans seemed to approach difficulty from the opposite direction. Rather than asking what should happen, they focused on what could still be done. The final archive explained the term that had appeared inside the girl's classification file. Miracle candidate. Kareth expected references to genetics, experimental enhancement, or specialized combat programs. Instead, he found educational doctrine. Humanity maintained institutions dedicated to cultivating individuals capable of functioning during impossible circumstances. Candidates were deliberately exposed to uncertainty. Unexpected failures. Incomplete information. Contradictory objectives. The goal was not perfection. The goal was adaptability. One passage captured the philosophy clearly. Miracles are simply solutions discovered after everyone else stops searching. Kareth sat silently for several minutes after reading it. Suddenly the girl's actions made sense. Her success in training exercises. Her calm behavior. Her ability to organize confused recruits. None of it resulted from extraordinary physical abilities. She had been trained to think differently. Where others encountered obstacles, she searched for alternatives. Where others saw failure, she searched for remaining options. That mindset itself was the advantage. A final notation appeared near the end of the archive. Current Miracle Program candidates, extremely limited. Evaluation priority, strategic importance. Before Kareth could continue, emergency alerts erupted throughout the Academy network. Red warning symbols flashed across every display. Priority channels activated simultaneously. The instructor immediately accessed the incoming transmission. The message originated from outside Academy jurisdiction. A civilian transport convoy had suffered a catastrophic systems failure near the sector border. Multiple vessels were drifting toward a hazardous stellar debris field. Rescue estimates projected severe casualties. Response fleets were too far away. The situation was real. No simulation. No training exercise. No controlled environment. For the first time since her arrival, Kareth looked toward the human cadet and understood why Command had sent her there. Moments later, the Academy received orders to prepare for emergency deployment. And the greatest test of the miracle candidate was about to begin. The Academy deployment vessel reached the damaged convoy less than 2 hours after receiving the distress signal. The situation was worse than initial reports suggested. A cascading systems failure had spread across multiple civilian transports. Navigation arrays were offline. Communication networks were fragmented. Several vessels were drifting toward a dense debris region created by ancient collisions. Countless fragments of metal and rock moved through the area at lethal velocities. If the convoy entered the field, rescue operations would become nearly impossible. Academy personnel immediately established a command center. Predator cadets expected experienced officers to assume control. Instead, confusion spread. Every update revealed another complication. Power shortages. Conflicting sensor readings. Unreliable communication links. Evacuation projections changed constantly. Traditional rescue models depended on stable information. Stable information did not exist. Senior officers debated priorities. Every option carried significant risk. Time continued disappearing. The human watched silently for several minutes. Then she started asking questions. Not about probabilities. Not about regulations. About available resources. Which ships still had propulsion? Which channels remained functional? Which crews could still respond? Which systems were damaged and which were merely disconnected? One by one, pieces of information began forming a clearer picture. While others focused on what had failed, she focused on what still worked. The difference proved critical. Without requesting authority, she began assigning tasks. Cadets were dispatched to communication stations. Others coordinated engineering teams. Several recruits translated data between incompatible systems used by different species. The operation transformed from a collection of isolated responses into a unified effort. What surprised everyone most was how willingly Predator class followed her instructions. Weeks earlier, many had viewed her as an administrative mistake. Now they recognized something different. She never wasted effort proving herself. She simply solved problems. That confidence spread. As new obstacles emerged, solutions followed. When one transport lost maneuvering capability, she redirected assistance from a vessel that had completed its own stabilization procedures. When communication blackouts isolated entire passenger sections, she established relay chains through nearby ships. When evacuation routes became overcrowded, she reorganized priorities to prevent bottlenecks. Nothing she did seemed revolutionary. The effectiveness came from combining dozens of practical decisions into a coherent strategy. Hours passed. The convoy's trajectory slowly changed. One ship stabilized. Then another. Then another. Momentum shifted. For the first time since the crisis began, survival appeared realistic. Kareth observed the operation closely. He finally understood what centuries of classified reports had been trying to describe. Humanity's greatest strength was not aggression. Many species were more dangerous. It was not intelligence. The galaxy possessed brilliant minds everywhere. It was not technology. Several civilizations surpassed humanity in technical capability. The difference was persistence. Humans refused to surrender opportunities simply because success seemed unlikely. Most species treated impossible situations as conclusions. Humans treated them as challenges. The convoy reached safety shortly before entering the debris field. Every civilian vessel survived. Every passenger survived. Every crew survived. The final casualty report contained a number few expected. 0. Medical teams confirmed it repeatedly. Against all projections, everyone had made it out alive. Relief swept through the rescue operation. Exhausted crews celebrated. Officers exchanged stunned expressions. Predator cadets who had participated in the mission understood they had witnessed something extraordinary. Not a miracle in the supernatural sense. A miracle built from preparation, adaptability, cooperation, and relentless effort. Several days later, Senior Instructor Kareth completed his official report. The document required only a few paragraphs. Yet those paragraphs would eventually become mandatory reading within Predator class. He reviewed the final lines before submitting them. The paperwork error never existed. The human candidate was assigned intentionally. Initial assumptions regarding species classification proved fundamentally incorrect. The Academy was not evaluating the human. The Academy was evaluating everyone else. Kareth transmitted the report and closed the file. Across the training grounds, Predator cohort activities resumed. The human moved among her classmates as she always had. No celebration. No demand for recognition. No interest in personal glory. Just quiet determination. The same determination that had carried her species through extinction threats, impossible wars, and disasters that should have ended them. The cadets who had once laughed at her now understood why humanity's records were sealed. Not because the galaxy feared human violence. Because the galaxy struggled to explain human resilience. Predators entered the Academy believing strength meant domination. They graduated understanding a far greater truth. Real strength is standing in front of impossible odds, refusing to quit, and finding a path forward anyway. And among all the species in known space, humanity had turned that philosophy into an art form.